2021 presidential election in Uzbekistan.
And looking to others to try and see where best practice is.
Representative of the OSA also visited our country as a part of the expert.
For the process of voting. So we were able to have a very comprehensive and thorough overview here in the country. So that was something I thought that we felt important to say.
What else do you think should be considered of the organization of the electoral process?
Future reforms, which again are recommendations for the people of Uzbekistan to consider.
Or that electoral standards are the same for all peoples and the countries?
Not just at election time, but outside of elections, I think is very important.
Please tell us about the future plans of the OSA to cooperation with the SES of the Republic of Uzbekistan. Assalomu alaykum aziz do'stlar. Bugun biz formatdan tashqari ko'rsatuvimizning maxsus sonini tasvirga olishga qaror qildik. Boisi bugungi mehmonimiz Yevropada xavfsizlik va hamkorlik tashkilotining demokratik institutlar va inson huquqlari bo'yicha byurosi missiyasi rahbari Ouyen Merfi. Good afternoon, Mr. Merfi. Welcome to Central Election Commission of the Republic of Uzbekistan.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak with you today.
Mr. Merfi, the 2021 presidential election in our country was observed by representatives from many countries and organizations. Representative of the OSA also visited our country as a part of the expert. As international observer and electoral expert, what could you say about ongoing electoral reforms in our country?
Well, thank you for your question. And yes, that's correct. OSCE's ODIHR deployed a full observation mission for the presidential elections last year. What that meant was that for a period of 7 weeks, there were experts from all of the OSCE participating states here in Uzbekistan observing the election. And for the election weekend itself, we had 365 observers for the process of voting. So we were able to have a very comprehensive and thorough overview of what was happening in the campaigns, in the electoral process, and in voting as well. And what we observed was that there had been a period of reforms of not just the election codes, but wider reforms as well in Uzbekistan. And these reforms, these recent reforms, did introduce welcome improvements into the election process here in the country. So that was something I thought that we felt important to say. But we also noted that there needs to be further reforms if the country is to become genuinely pluralistic in its politics.
The OSA's final report on the 2021 presidential election in Uzbekistan considered the Central Election Commission compliance with the electoral law and professionally conducted of the task and the timely manner. On what indicators did the organization consider the work of the SES? What else do you think should be considered of the organization of the electoral process?
Well, thank you. So I would think it's important to say that ODIHR and the Central Election Commission here in Uzbekistan have a very strong working relationship, that there is, I think, mutual respect between the two bodies, and so therefore the organization and the cooperation that we have, not just at election time, but outside of elections, I think is very important. And what we observed in all of our interactions with the Central Election Commission was that they worked professionally, they worked efficiently, and they worked openly as well. And that's incredibly important when it comes to the administration of the elections. And I think in our report, when we talk about the possibility for future reforms, which again are recommendations for the people of Uzbekistan to consider, we look at things like what is happening at the District Electoral Commission. We look at things like the organization of precinct electoral commissions. We talk about things like training. And we talk about things like greater transparency around data. So publishing more data broken down by things like polling station and those types of things. So the relationship that we have, I think, is an important one. I think that the Central Election Commission did its work, as I said, professionally efficiently and openly, but we have noted those areas where we think further improvements can be made.
Mr. Merfi, international election standards are the same for all countries, but each nation has its own tradition, its historical culture. As an expert, do you think it's better the nation act on the basis of their own tradition, historical law, and culture implicating the recommendation of international observers, or that electoral standards are the same for all peoples and the countries?
I mean, every participating state in the OSCE, every sovereign nation must make its own decisions. And one of the decisions that Uzbekistan has made is to be an active member of the OSCE and to sign up to certain international standards and commitments in addition to their own domestic laws. And what I think that says about Uzbekistan is that they want to evolve and reform their electoral process according, of course, to their own traditions, but also recognizing that they too have signed up to certain international standards and commitments. So whenever we are talking about reform or change or improving a democracy, as we do in every democracy all of the time, it's not unique to Uzbekistan. Every democracy at the moment is undergoing change, and some quite profound change, that each country in the OSCE must develop its own electoral framework. But each of those countries has agreed that the best way to do that is by working to international standards, adapting those international standards for their own country's circumstances, and looking to others to try and see where best practice is. It's never in one place. I mean, the whole purpose of an organization like ODIHR is to take the good developments that are happening in different places and to then see, well, is there a way that they might apply in another country? Perhaps they will, perhaps they won't. But basically, how can we work together as a group of 57 participating states to improve the overall health of all of our democracies?
The OSCE final report makes a recommendation and achievement and shortcoming of the Central Commission of the Republic of Uzbekistan in this electoral system. What do you think? What are the achievements of the 2021 presidential election in Uzbekistan?
Well, I mean, whenever you hold an election, a democratic election, and you hold it the way it was held, in a timely manner, you hold it professionally, you're open in the processes that you're adopting, and that the election day then happens in a peaceful manner, and people are able to go in and vote, the results are counted, the results are announced, and you have a winner. Whenever that happens, I think that's a successful operation of a Central Electoral Commission. Of course, we have pointed out areas where there can be improvements. Perhaps most importantly in the individual polling stations when it comes to people voting, when it comes to their votes being counted and the tabulation of those results. From the observations that we made, we saw the need to make improvements in those areas. So I think that's very important. I should probably also say, though, that in our very first meeting with the Central Election Commission on this visit, the first thing that they wanted to speak about to us was the reform process that has already been initiated in Uzbekistan since the last presidential election, taking on board our recommendations, but also their own internal analysis. So before we had published our final report, before we had arrived with our recommendations and come here to present them formally, it seems to me that a process of reform since the election had already begun and is continuing. And we've had a number of meetings with different state authorities and the political parties, and they're all talking about the reform process that's now underway.
Mr. Merfi, it's my last question for you. Please tell us about the future plans of the OSCE to cooperation with the SES of the Republic of Uzbekistan.
Well, no, and thank you, because I think it's very important. I mean, ODIHR and election observation isn't just at the time of the election, because, as I said earlier, reform is a constant process. We're constantly trying to change and improve each of our democracies in the OSCE. And so we have offered the authorities here that if they would like further help in understanding some of our recommendations or in developing draft legislation, that we stand ready to help in any way that we can. So while we'll finish our meetings this week, ODIHR remains available to help in any way that it may. And of course, my understanding is that there will be draft legislation, further reforms, perhaps as early as the autumn, but of course that's a decision for the authorities in Uzbekistan. And at that point then there might be some further cooperation between ODIHR and the CEC or ODIHR and other state authorities. But we've also said to the Central Election Commission, to the chairman and to his colleagues, that if we can help in an informal manner, perhaps it's helping to discuss a certain topic, perhaps it's about providing expertise, we can also help in that way as well, if it's requested.
Mr. Merfi, we are happy to work with you and your organization. Thank you again.
No, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.